Well, let me say to you, happy Mother's Day to those of you who are joining in with us at Madras and Northgate, those of you watching online. Just want to say, again, happy Mom's Day. And let me just start by seeing the hands of everybody who is a parent these days. And really, I'm thinking about those of you who are actively involved, engaged in it. I mean, I'm a parent, but really, I'm like graduated. I'm in a different era of parenting. We still parent, but it's just different. I'm talking about those of you who are really in it. And it's just different from the area that I'm in. And what I want to say to you, is sort of as my Mother's Day gift to you today, is something that all of the people who are in my era know, but that nobody ever says to you in the era that you're in. But it's really important you know. So I just want to tell you, you are not a bad parent if you get home at the end of a long day and you're sitting in your driveway or in your garage, and you have to psych yourself up to go into that house. That does not make you a bad parent to have to go in, that you feel like you need some energy to go see your family. I had a very good friend of mine that years ago, when we were both right in the middle of heavy-duty parenting, where it's just exhausting at times. One night I get a phone call, and I see it's him, and I answer and go, "Hey, what's up?" And he goes, "All right, I'm sitting in my driveway." And I go, "Yeah?" He goes, "Give me one reason why I have to go in there." Parenting is just exhausting. It's just tiring, and it's expensive too. I mean, we told our kids when we were there living in our house, hey, the day you were born was one of the best days of our life, and we are so thankful you're in our family. But one day you're going to move out, so plan accordingly for that day to come. My guess is that for some of you who are moms here today, that the best gift that your family could give you is like a nap, right? You're just tired. How many moms want a nap today? Well, let me see if I can help with that. So we're in this series called My Biggest Problem, and this series grows out of a series of conversations that we have around here once or twice a year, where we talk to our staff and we ask the question, what are you helping people with? What are the biggest issues in our congregation? What are we helping people get into counseling with? What are you praying with them about? What are people struggling with that we could talk about and help them? And so we've already talked about worry and stress, and that's a big one. And then last week we talked about money, and that one's huge. But today I get to talk about the biggest one of all. I get to talk about my biggest problem, and my biggest problem is you. My biggest problem is people. Any of you with me on that your biggest problem is just other people, trying to get them to do what you want them to do, trying to get them to do what you need from them. Just people. People can be so exhausting and frustrating. And again, since it's Mom's Day, I was thinking about this as we were getting ready for this message, and just thinking about how it is, when you're right in the heart of parenting. I can remember when our sons were really small, and it seemed like it was just constant every day of, hey, boys, you can't just leave your stuff laying around. I need you to pick up your stuff. Pick up your stuff. No, you cannot undress as you walk to your room and throw your stuff on the floor. Pick up your stuff. Just pick up your stuff. And then the one that I had to say all the way through when they finally left our house, and now I understand that they say it to their wives and roommates, that I would say is, hey, guys, turn the lights off. If you're not in a room, just turn the lights off. I mean, if there's nobody in the room, why do we need a light off? If you could just turn the light off in the room. And finally they got it when they started paying for the bills on their own. Now I understand they're saying that one to other people. But parenting, like any deal with people, and this didn't just for those of you who are parents. I mean, if you're single, or you're single again, or you're working with people, I mean, people are just difficult, and they often are the biggest problem in our life. They're just draining to us, and it's how that we deal with them. So today, in trying to figure out what God has to say to us about dealing with our biggest problem of people, I want to show you a passage of Scripture that for me has just become foundational. In fact, I just recently had somebody say to me that this was a passage I taught the very first time they ever came to Community Christian, which has been a long time ago now. It's foundational to my life. It's one of those passages I just think everybody needs to come to again and again and again. This is from Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23, and it's really simple. And I think it's helpful if you could just memorize it and you just put it down as the foundation of your life, and it's not that hard. It's pretty short. Here it is. Above all else, guard your heart, for it's the wellspring of life. In other words, everything I do and everything I say flows out of my heart. Every word, every action flows from my heart toward you and toward the people in my life. And I want to try to demonstrate this to you today, and I'm going to use an illustration that I've used before. Back when I talked to kids particularly, I would use this, but this is an old illustration. Some of you probably have seen it. You're going to see it again today as I talk to you about this thing of people in our life. Now, what I have here is this picture, and this picture represents my heart. Now, what I want to start is I want to start with just making clear who is responsible for what's in my heart. I mean, if I wake up in the morning, and this is hard for you to believe, I bet, but I wake up with a bad attitude. It happens sometimes. I wake up about a quarter turn off. Who is responsible for what's in my heart? Who is that? It's me. I am 100% responsible for what's in me. The words that flow out of me, they flow out of my heart. The actions that flow out of me toward other people, no one else did that. That's not Satan. That's not someone else. Ed Martin is 100% responsible for what's in my heart. Now, these other glasses you see here, these represent the people in my life. But before we get to them, I just want, again, I want you to focus on, when it comes to your heart, who is responsible for what's in your heart? It's you. Who makes you so mad? You do. I mean, who is it that's responsible for your bad attitude toward people? You are. You are 100% responsible for your heart. Above all else, guard your heart. But with that being said, that brings us to the people in my life. My biggest problem, people in my life that I interact with on a day-to-day basis. Now, outside of God, this glass right here represents the primary relationship in my life. Who's the primary relationship in my life outside of God? It'd be my wife. This represents Becky, and I like this. This represents Becky well. Becky has been a part of my life now for, in fact, this week, Becky and I will have been married 34 years. And I am really blessed in that. I say to her all the time, because I talk to people about their relationships, I think we're really blessed because we genuinely like each other. And she's not only my wife, and I've enjoyed doing life with her, she's on our staff, so I get to work with her. Becky's responsible for our children's and teen curriculum and for overseeing those programs here, and she does a great job, and I love getting to do life with her. But no relationship just happens. Relationships, things have to come from us in the relationship. So I have to pour into my wife, and I love pouring into my wife. I love building into her. It's a part of what I like to do. Now, Becky and I were married for about 7 years, and for a while we didn't think we could have children, and then 7 years into our marriage, we were blessed with our first son. John came into our life, and he brought such energy and joy and life, and we loved having John, and we poured into him, and it was just the best thing. In fact, it was so incredibly good to have John in our life, and Becky and I thought we were so good at it that we go, man, we got this parenting thing kicked, and we sort of owe it to the earth to bless them with more Martin children. And so we did twice more as Nathan and Benjamin were born, and we have poured into them now as they've grown. And I love my family, like I'm sure you do yours. I love being with them. I love pouring into them. But just to be clear, I mean, for some of you who are right in the middle of parenting now, you're right in the heart of the season, I just want to say to you, you're in one of the most fun, full eras of life. But it also is just exhausting, and I understand that. I just want to acknowledge that for you. The reward is coming. I mean, I can remember, again, I'll just say, for me, the hardest part when they were little was just listening. They say the average man speaks about 7,000 words a day, the average woman about 20,000 words a day. I think Becky and I are probably reversed on that. I probably am the one that speaks more. But I'm telling you, one of our sons, and I won't tell you which one, but he came out, and I think when he was little, he had 80,000 words a day. and he would just wear me out. I can remember taking him to Braves game, and he would talk the whole time, and I'd come home, I'd go, Becky, I don't know how you do it. It's just exhausting, but I love my family. I love building into them, like I'm sure you do as well, even though it's tiring. And then just a few years ago into our family, one of my sons got married, and into our life came a new person, Jennifer, and then also into that life, our life later came Sarah. And I'll just say that my two daughters that have come into my life through the marriage of my sons, they've been such a huge upgrade to our family. And this will be the first time I get to talk about this to you, and I'm sure it won't be the last illustration I'll use for this, but recently we found out that we're going to have two additions. We're going to have twins in our family, and I'm going to be a grandpa or, big daddy or poo-poo or whatever you guys let kids call you. And we're going to have twins in our family and add to it. Now, in addition to that, like you, Becky and I, my parents are deceased, but Becky's parents are still alive, so we have some responsibility. Both of her parents are in their 80s, and Becky's dad is such a great man. He's an elder in the church, and he's always been such a solid part. And then there's Becky's mom, and that takes care of that. So we all have family. Hey, don't judge me. I know some of you are thinking if you'd pour more in, you might get more. You don't know me, so that's just an illustration. Anyway, so whatever, don't write me any letters about that. But anyway, in addition to our family, we also have people in our life that we work with. So I have people on our staff I'm responsible for, and they're people that I work with. And, work relationships are building, and you have to pour into them and build into them as well. And you have to give them a part of your life and encourage them and be a part and be on teams with them and lead them. And, there's always that person you have to work with that just sucks the life right out of you. I won't say who this is. This one right here, this represents Jason only because it's a little nicer than the other, takes a little more care of himself than other people. Now, what I want you to notice is that for the people in my world, I've been pouring into them, but I want you to notice what's happened to my heart. I mean, look at that. And every time I see this, I'm just reminded of this. This is why when I get at the end of the day, often I feel like, man, I'm just empty. I got nothing else to give. I've been pouring into people, and I'm just empty. I got nothing else that I can give to make this whole thing come about the way that it ought to. But here's the really important question we have to ask ourselves when we look into this thing. As I pour into the people in my life, what is it that's flowing out of me? What came out of me? Jesus puts it this way when he's talking to some religious leaders one time when they're asking him about why his disciples don't, keep the traditions, and they're eating on the Sabbath and they don't wash their hands before they're eating. And here's what he says. They're asking, why do you dishonor the traditions of the elders? He says, don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? And he just gives a little biology lesson that we all know that it's not, none of us really consider the things that we'd eat the distasteful stuff. It's the stuff that comes out. We don't need to talk about that. Then he says, but the thing that comes out of a person's mouth, they come from the heart, and they're what defile. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, and slander. Our words and our action, they're flowing from our heart. So again, I am responsible for my heart. I'm responsible for what's in my heart. But here's what happens too often, and here's what I want to talk to you about primarily with this illustration today, because this happens too often. And when I began to look at the people in my life, and I began to expect them to pour back into me and fill me up so I have something to give, when I look at them and go, look, I've given you so much, and I poured into you for your whole life, and I give and I give and I give. I just need you to behave right, and I need you to, I'm not asking for too much, just help me, fill me back up. What I've just described to you, now there are other parts of this, is what we would call codependency. It's me being dependent on somebody else to fill up my heart, to fill up my life. In fact, I'll just give you a definition of codependency. This is not a full definition, but this is a definition that will work for us today. Codependency is me plugging into another person as the source of life, as as my source of life. When I look at people in my life and I expect them to fill me up, to pour into me so I have something to give. And I'll just show you how this works. When I look at my wife, when I look at Becky and I expect her to be the source of my life, when I look at her and when I have an attitude problem, when we have a problem that's between her, when I look at her at the source of my life, who do you think is my problem? She's my problem. I mean, she's the one that needs to change. She needs to adjust. She needs to fix. She needs to help me. She needs to give to me. She needs to build into me. And again, this is where so many marriages just get stuck, is I'm looking at the other person and I'm expecting them to fill me up. I'm expecting them to complete me. That sad old line in the movie is, I want them to pour into me so I have something to go back. And so, of course, this is where, again and again, couples just get stuck. Because as long as you are the source of my life, I can never enjoy life until you change. I can never become happy. I can never experience joy. I will always have a problem. And my problem, I'm not responsible for the problem. My problem's you. You need to give and you need to change. And I'll just say, and it's a sad thing, but true, I spent too much of my life with Becky, which has been great. I've spent too much time trying to get her to be, well, frankly, more like me. To think like me and talk like me and act like me and be like me, because I'm awesome. And if you're just more like me, you'd build into me. When we look at people as a source of our life in marriage, we get stuck and there becomes conflict, and that person becomes my biggest problem because I'm tapping to them as a source of my life. I just tell you, for Becky and I, one of the ways that this often happens, one of the things that we like to do together is Becky and I we watch movies and we binge watch TV. If you guys know what I'm talking about, we'll get on a series and we'll just watch a bunch of them. And to be honest with you, we both do things when the movie is going on, but it bothers me that her full attention isn't on what we're doing. So, like, we'll be watching something and Becky will be in the other room. She'll be cooking something. I'll say, hey, are you seeing this? Can you see this from in there? You're watching? She'll go, oh, yeah, I'm watching. But I can hear her cooking, or I can see her folding clothes, or she's walking around looking at something, reading at something. Again, and frankly, I'm doing it too. But it really becomes a problem when you're watching a movie or TV show and they start putting writing on the screen. And I know that if she doesn't see what's on the screen, it's going to be a problem later. And I'll go, hey, did you see that? And she'll go, what was it? I go, it said 6 years later. I mean, if you don't get this, you're going to miss everything. And she'll go, well, what's going on? I go, well, Jack Bauer's just in a building and it blew up, and now the terrorists are getting away, and we don't know what's going. He didn't know how he's going to catch them. Well, what are they going to do? I don't know. Why don't we watch the movie together and then we'll know? And when I look at her as the source of my irritation, the source of my problem, I mean, we're just different. That's just the problem. And this isn't my wife and me, but some of you, this came out real clear when you're listening to the money message last week. You know, the way you handle money is just so different, and it's the other person that's the problem. So one of you grew up in a home where the word savings meant money that you set aside for the future, for retirement, or for, something you're going to need in the future. And for the other person, savings is the difference between the actual cost and then the price that you paid for it. That's savings. For me and my wife, Becky is a rule keeper. If somebody makes a rule, Becky figures they had a reason for it, and she wants to keep every rule. So when we're driving on the road, Becky sees every rule as something you have to do, and if you don't do it, God stops to love you when you break those rules. For me, rules are like suggestions for other people so they stay out of my way and don't cause me any problems. And so, I've had to work hard over 34 years just to teach her common things like, how do you cut people off in traffic? You just pull in like you didn't see them. Don't look over at them. Don't look over. Just pull in. Most of us, the truth is, we wind up in relationship with people who are just so different for us, and trying to spend time changing this person that we loved enough to get in a relationship with, and we can't be happy because they aren't behaving and pouring back into us. They become our biggest problem because we think our life comes from them. The very best thing that you could do is you could just resign as the general manager of the universe and of your spouse. And some of you right now, the energy is just drained out of your marriage relationship because you're exhausted. That's what control does. Trying to control the other person, it's just exhausting. When I try to take other people and I'm constantly saying, why am I not getting from you what I need? Why can you not get this right? Why can't you give back to me? I set them up for the source, and you need to fix some things, and you need to do some things, and we need to behave a different way, and then I'll be complete, and then I'll be happy. But of course, it's not just my spouse that it can become my source of life. I mean, for a lot of us, our kids become the source of life, right? I mean, that's what Facebook is for, right? To let everybody know how much your kids fill you up. And I mean, social media is all about vanity parenting, and we put our best foot forward and we let everybody see. But when my kids become my source of life, then I begin to continue to pour into them, and I give to them, and I raise the bar, and they've got to give back to me, and they're not pouring into me, and they drain out of me, and I give to them. And when they do well, I feel like I'm getting something back, but when they don't do well, I feel like it's taking more out of me. And this whole thing of helicopter vanity parenting, where I'm so worried I'm pouring, but I don't get anything out, I'm just telling you, it's because we're building in as if our kids were our life, that life comes from our kids. And I just say, when you plug into this mistaken idea that it's an input-output kind of thing, that what I put in, I get out, if you think that when you put in the right stuff, you'll just get the right stuff out, just be aware that at some point you put in and you get something out that's not right. If you want to take credit for all the good stuff that comes out, you better be ready to take credit for all the bad stuff that comes out. And can I just say, I was talking about how hard it is for some of you who are right in the middle of this. For people who are in my area of parenting, and I see people with adult children who are at this place, and you're in this where your kids were your source of life and everything was about them, and then at some point they get off track, and you feel like you're a failure. You feel like you did something terribly wrong, and your life is almost over. Can I remind you that there's a part in the Bible, in the book of Lamentations, where the Bible says that God's mercies are new every day. And you need to plug into God and His mercies and receive them every day. Because the truth is, some of the parents that you're comparing yourself to, that their kids are doing so well and they're the same age that you are, they may have made the same mistakes or worse mistakes than you did, and their kids just made different choices. And they aren't responsible for what their kids did any more than you're totally responsible. They aren't totally responsible, and you aren't either. It's just a different thing. And what I need to say, I need to hang on to as much as any of you. I need to keep this in front of me as much as any of you need to keep in front of you. I mean, the point I want to make is this. God is my source of life. God's my source of life, not you. See, we can make our kids source of life. We make our spouse. We also make our parents our source of life. I mean, what does that look like? It looks like that everything you do, even when you're adult, that you're trying to figure out, would mom and dad approve? What would my mom and dad say? What would they say about what would my mom and dad think about this? I sit in my office and talk to people who are torn up about what they're going to do at Christmas and Thanksgiving because they know mom wants them to come, but they're not really sure that they can. What does mom want? Am I going to disappoint mom? I mean, I've sat and listened to people in agony over decisions that are painfully clear of what's right to do, but they can't make it because they think they're going to disappoint their dad. Because their dad's their source of life, and these people are full-grown humans. It's codependency. It's finding my source of life. But again, I have to hold on to this. God is my source of life, not you. God is my source of life. And the thing is, when God is my source of life, not you, when God is the one that pours into me, then I can serve you without expecting anything back. I can give to you without expecting that you're going to pour back into me. I don't have to look at you and go, I give and I give and I give, and you don't react right. I can look at you and I can give to you because you are not the source of what's in me. I am receiving life from a different source from God. See, There's a part in the Bible that talks about this, and I know some of you are wondering if I was ever going to get to the Bible, but I want to read a verse of Scripture to you that one of the followers of Jesus, a guy named John, writes to a church that he's helping mentor long after Jesus has been resurrected, and he talks about this very thing. He says, if anyone acknowledges that Jesus is the Son of God, God lives in them, and they in God. Same guy, John, writing, but he's writing down what Jesus had said years earlier. This is another book. Jesus said, anyone who keeps my commands, anyone who loves me will keep my commands. And my Father will love you and will come, and we will make our home with you. And then John says again in the other book, he says, and so we know, and here's the word, and rely on. We rely on the love of God that God has for us. God is love. And whoever lives in love lives in God and God in them. In other words, no matter how hard I try, no matter how hard you try, no matter how hard I try to generate love, no matter how hard I try to fill myself up with love, no matter how hard I try to be the source of love, I cannot be the source of love that I pour into other people. I mean, later John says, God is love. God's my source. God's where I get my source of life, not you. Codependency is me plugging into people, expecting them pouring back into me. And then they become my biggest problem when I have nothing to give and the issue is all about them. But God is my source of life, not you. And therefore, when I plug into God, God has an unlimited supply. See, I think at times we live if we think there's a limited supply. And I mean, it's almost like, a few years ago back, you remember when they came on, and you saw it on Facebook probably, or that's where I saw it the first time, and they said, Twinkies has gone bankrupt, and you hadn't eaten a Twinkie in 10 years, but the morning they said Twinkies was bankrupt and they were going to make them, what'd you think? I got to get some Twinkies! And you went out and you bought all the Twinkies that you could. I think it was just a marketing thing, because Twinkies are still around, aren't they? Or it's like that knock you get on your door when the county's out working on the water line and somebody knocks on your door and they go, hey, we're going to be working in your area for the next few hours, so you're not going to have any water. And you go, what, no water? I'm not going to have any water? And you go, no, wait, don't turn it off. And you go fill up all the bathtubs and all that. I mean, it's a couple of hours. You weren't even going to do anything with big tubs of water, but you thought the supply was limited, so you had to have it. We tend to act like love is this limited supply. So I've got to get it out of people, and I've got to get it into me so that I have something to give. People are the source of where I get love and life. But when God is the source of my love, and I live in Him, and I'm connected to Him through Jesus, then there is an unlimited supply. Jesus said it's like well springs of life that come from the inside and overflow out of us. Gary Chapman wrote a book a number of years ago called The Love Languages, and it's just this great book that talks about how all of us have different ways of expressing and receiving love. Like my wife's primary love languages are acts of service and quality time, which means that I love her by serving her for long periods of time. That is not at all, that's a bad joke. That is not at all true. It's actually the other way around. But God has a love language, that He gives and receives love. And His love language is called Jesus. Jesus is the way. In Him we have life. He says in Him we have life, and it's full and overflowing, abundant life we receive from God through Jesus. But He also says Jesus is the way to God. I am the way to life. No one enters to the Father but through me. God has a love language. It's Jesus. And He's the source of life, not your spouse, not your children, not your work, not your parents, not anybody else in the world. No person should be the source of life. So on this Mother's Day, I want to give you a gift. You can use it immediately. I want to give you the freedom to fire the people in your life as your source. For your moms, you're free to go home and look at your kids and go, you're fired. You are no longer the source of my life. You are no longer my life. You are no longer the thing that pours into me that I have then to give back to you. God is the source of my life. And the things that flow out of me to you come from the hand of a good Father who already gave them to me. Hey, this is why some of you are so drained and exhausted all the time. Because you're looking to something other than the true source of love and life to have something toward other people. And it's why people are so exhausting to us. When I plug into anything else other than the source of life, people wear me out. In fact, the truth is, many of you today, when you saw me today do this illustration with this picture, you thought, that's me. Except I am bone dry. I pour into people all the time, and nobody gives back to me. But here you are. You're at church, where we have a Father who has given it all, a source of life, unended, unlimited, to fill you up, that your heart would be full, so that you could pour back to people in your life, so that you could give to them in the way that He's given to you. It reminds me, some of you, you don't even have a pitcher that's full of clean liquid you'd want to give to anybody. Because other people have been the source of life in you, your life is filled up by the bitterness of a parent who abused you or a spouse who betrayed you, and you're so full of other kind of stuff that even the stuff you pour out, you're full. Oh, you're full. But the stuff you pour out is just, it's nasty stuff. Another follower of Jesus writes in a different place, a guy named Paul, he writes this: get rid of all bitterness, rage, anger, brawling, and slander, along with every form of malice. Be kind and compassionate to one another. It's what you want to pour into the people you love. But how do you do that? How do I forgive my parents for what they do to me? How do I forgive my spouse who walked out on me? How do I forgive what they did to treat me? How do I do that? Just as Christ forgave you. You just practice the gospel that you say, God, you believed for you. You clean up the source of your life. You get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, just as, in the same way, you forgive them, just as Christ forgave you. I see change. When they change, then I'll forgive them. That is not how God forgave you. When you look at people that way, then people become the roadblock to you ever being rid of your bitterness and anger and that. But you are 100% responsible for your heart. And just as Christ forgave you, you can forgive them, and you can clean up what comes out of you toward them. So here's what I want to do today as we close on this Mother's Day. I want to pray for you, with you. I'm sure you'll be praying. I want to pray with you and for you. And before I do, I just want to ask you to bow your heads. Just go ahead and bow your heads, and I want to give you a chance to just, with your heads bowed, can I ask you this question? Who really is your source of life right now? Who have you made the source of your life? What is it you rely on right now for your source of life? Is it your spouse? Is it your children? Is it your parents? It could be God. Through God's love language of Jesus, God could become an unending supply of clean, fresh, good love that would flow from you to other people, and your life could be full and joyful. Do you have expectations for other people that are unmet, and so they fill you with bitterness and rage? God could be the source of cleaning that up in your life. As I plug into not other people, but God, and God's enough. Let's bow together, and I'll pray for you. And now, Father in heaven, I pray for everyone that joined in today, and for me, that we would be reminded that no other person can be the source of life, and that we are responsible for our hearts. And yet you've come to us and you said, give me your heart, open your life to me, give me your heart, And I will pour into you a river of life that will flow out of you into well springs that will flow over in joy and love to people around you. God, we want to love the people that are around us, not for them to be our biggest problem, but to plug into you and find the source of life that brings joy to us. I pray that you'll help us do this. For people today that need, for the first time, to turn to Jesus, to find love through him in you, I pray that they will, and that they'll tell somebody about their decision so that we can help them make their first step. In his name I pray. Amen.